Okay, so I will call I'll call to order the March 11th, 2024 SFO Airport Roundtable Technical Working Group at 1:01 PM. We're meeting in person at the Brisbane City Hall, the large conference room, and virtually via Zoom. Joining us today are staff to the roundtable: Kathleen Wentworth, Roundtable Coordinator; Diane Estepona, Administrative Secretary to the Roundtable; and Eugene Reindel, HMMH Technical Consultant to the Roundtable. We also have present Bert Ganon, SFO Airport Noise Office Manager. Kathleen and Diane will also advise if we have others to be recognized.
Not at this time.
Okay, we'll now move on to roll call. Ms. Wentworth, please proceed.
Chair Terry O'Connell,
Present.
member Sandy Alvarez, member Angelina Cahalan. Here. And member Alvarez.
Here.
Quorum.
Great, thank you. We will now move on to the agenda item 1, introduction and comments from subcommittee chairperson.
Did you want to take public comment first?
Did I skip a page?
Thank you.
I did. Okay. We'll now move on to public comment for items not on the agenda. Staff will note written comments which have been received and will allow members of the public to speak on items not on the agenda. Members of the public who are present and have turned in speaker slips will be heard first, followed by members of the public joining remotely. Ms. Estepona will explain how the public can participate in today's meeting.
For those attending the meeting on Zoom video conference, we'll use the raise hand feature in order to organize any public comments. During the general public comment period, and for each item on the regular agenda, I will ask those members of the public who wish to comment to click the raise hand feature to speak on the agenda item. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. When you hear your name called, I will prompt you to unmute your microphone and inform you that you may begin speaking. You will have 2 minutes. Please note that members of the public must wait for the prompt in connection with each agenda item before using the raised hand function. Written comments submitted in advance will be acknowledged during discussion of the appropriate agenda item. Thank you. At this time, no written agenda was received. Written public comment.
Okay, and Ms. Estepona, do we have any persons wishing to speak on an items not on the agenda?
We currently do not.
Okay, thank you. That will move us on to introduction and comments from subcommittee chairperson. We'll move on to item agenda 1, introduction and comments from me. How we got here? Did you have those?
I have that in here. I can give you a brief overview.
Okay, that'd be
Very,
great.
very, very brief.
That's great.
And I think actually Mr. Reindel and his PowerPoint will have more details than this, but most recently, back in 2019, this committee authorized around the roundtable a noise study that was published initially in the spring of 2021 with a slight revision in 2023. And this, I'm going to leave to Jean to explain the technical aspects of it. But that was a completed study. Shortly after that study, there was some discussion about it, and we came to discuss the possibility of a small supplemental study that would address 1 or 2 sections from that original study to see what the data shows on that. And so that's where we're at now, is where that's follow-up secondary study that Jean will talk about next in his presentation.
Okay, great, thank you.
Kathleen, if I had a couple comments, because we have a
Yes.
couple of new members here. This committee is a relatively new subcommittee of the Roundtable. It was only formed about 5 or 6 years ago. Frankly, at the impetus of former council member Schneider, or former member Schneider, to try to deal with ground-based noise. I think Gene's gonna go into the difference between ground-based noise, which typically affects the closed-in cities more than the overrated cities. We started off trying to determine, could we define the problem, and then could we define what caused it? And we went through a couple of different, some very great discussions that Gene led and Bert were part of, trying to figure out, was there construction changes in the last 20 years? Were there barriers that were up that came down? Were there new buildings put up that sounds reverberating from? And we had a lot of premises, but we wanted then to get some proof of were they causing any kind of impact? And that led to this noise modeling study that Gene led, HBBM, or how you call Gene, excuse me, name of your company. I always get the acronym screwed up. To do this noise modeling study, which is fairly detailed and went through a lot of different hypotheses and then some determination of what impact that might have. That study is actually very good, and I refer back to it as a starting point. Because I think what we found was based on that study, at least initially, we had no evidence that there are actions we could take that we thought would be fairly likely that would reduce ground-based noise to the communities. In particular, we talked about vegetation. Could we increase vegetation? Could we put barriers up? And there were problems with that, and I think we'll get into that. We also talk about buildings, where the new buildings going up and was a sound reverberating off, and was that causing an increase? We were not conclusive on that. But I guess my point I'm trying to make is we did go through a number of different hypotheses trying to determine, could we quantify and provide evidence, and could we provide a solution to that? And I don't think we were able to come up with them, Terry, if I remember correct. That led us to concrete actions we could take. That then led to, well, is noise different sea level and A level? And would it increase because of the contours as it goes up the hill? And maybe we could do something around that, and that's what led to this next study. So just as a way of a background, because at one time there was a group of, I forget the name of the citizens group.
Runway noise.
There was a big membership of
Something like that,
Hillsborough,
from-
Burlingame, and
Yeah,
Millbrae
from-
citizens that actually attended these meetings. And they have not been in attendance for a couple of years. Because I think they felt, based on initial study, that the answer doesn't lie in us making man-made solutions to it. That the answer had to come from technology or other changes. At least that was my premise from it. And so, anyway, I just throw that out there as a way of a background because I think this is an issue with closing communities. I'm not sure the answers were as simple as we initially hoped. And that's what we're still pursuing now.
And for the record, I'm not sure if someone wants to give us a brief overview of what constitutes or what's the perception of ground-based noise. Because I know that includes, run-ups and CPU usage and, all the other things. But I think that if we got a little broad overview of what that is somewhere here this afternoon, that would be good. Just so we have an idea of what constitutes, I mean, I know laying trying to go to sleep at 1 a.m, I can hear the wind up of planes that are, I'm not sure if that's doing a run up or if that's when they, are gearing up to do their initial takeoff. But I mean, I can hear them when the wind is right. I hear it coming around and coming up my hillside, and we're, several miles from the airport. So, but I know there's a lot of other activities taking place on the ground that make noise. And the airport never sleeps.
I'm sure Mr. Rindell will be happy to
Add some of
add a
that.
few comments at
Right.
the outset.
Right.
I think it's a great idea.
So do we want to kick it up with item 2, discussion and direction of use of the portable noise monitors?
And Jean is first up.
Yes.
Okay, we ready for the brief presentation that I prepared? correct?
Yes, are you screen sharing or are we?
I'm about to.
Oh, okay, great.
You see my screen? With the
Yes.
first slide? All right, great.
Yes,
Let me, hold on, I need to minimize some other things so I can see it. Oops, that's not what. Okay, no, that worked. Okay, so yes, Chair, I can give a little bit brief background on ground-based noise. What this presentation is focused on is the next step in the problem definition that Alvarez referred to earlier. And that's based on the measurements that we're about to undertake as a follow-on to the modeling study we did around ground-based noise at the airport. So just to lay the groundwork before I move on, at your request, I will discuss a little bit about ground-based noise. So the way to think about ground-based noise in an airport is basically everything you would be able to hear from the airport absent the arrivals and departures that take place overhead in other communities. So the communities just adjacent to the airport, Millbrae, Hillsborough, Burlingame, those types of neighborhoods do not get predominantly aircraft flying overhead. And so, but they still get noise from the airport, and it's kind of like noise you hear but cannot see, is the way I also try to put it, is that, you know, in other parts where they are getting overhead, you know, flights, they can not only hear the noise, but they can see the noise source. That's not always the case for ground-based noise. It's, again, all the noise that you're hearing from the airport, whether it's the refueling trucks, tow trucks that are towing aircraft in or mostly out of the gates. Is it the APU noise, which is the auxiliary power on the aircraft that they use once parked at a gate to provide air conditioning and basically electric power to the aircraft? Is it, you know, them taxiing to take off? Is it taxiing after they take off? Is it the start of the roll for the takeoff? The airplane's still on the ground, it's running down the runway, and then it takes off. And that's really what the noise measurements are intended to capture, is that last ground noise source, and that is the aircraft departing on runways one left or one right while they're on the ground on the runway. So assuming that that's enough background into ground-based noise, I will move on. And it's a pretty simple outline here. I'm going to discuss a couple hypotheses that the community has put out there. Basically, it has come from, I say community, but I guess thinking about it more, it's probably from the Roundtable, which is, you know, community as well, but it's really come from this group. And then the modeling that's completed, I'll just briefly touch on that. I won't go into a lot of details as to what we've done. I think the report is something that you can go to and learn more. I'm happy to discuss any of the findings or the how we methodology with any of the members if you know they would like to take a few minutes to do that at some point. But then what I'm really wanting to focus on is the preparation of the noise measurements and how, you know, where we're going to take those, when we're going to take the measurements, and what we're going to do with them. So moving on, like I said, there's a couple hypotheses that came out of this working group or subcommittee, and that is that CNEL contours do not, and I will present CNEL contours eventually in this presentation for those of you that may not have seen previously the CNEL contours that show the area of high noise exposure from aircraft operations around the airport. But the hypothesis, again, the first one is that CNEL contours do not adequately represent the aircraft noise environment of the adjacent communities because aircraft do not generally overfly these communities. And then the second one is that low frequency noise is more prevalent in these adjacent communities due to how sound propagates over the ground, which reduces the higher frequency noise but leaves and doesn't reduce the lower frequency noise. So this is what we're trying to answer or provide information in terms of noise measurement data to determine whether these hypotheses bear truth. So real quickly on the noise modeling that was completed. The motivation of that was it was again a direction of this subcommittee to develop actually to incorporate, sorry, not to develop, to incorporate SFO in areas directly adjacent into the southwest of runways 1 left and 1 right of San Francisco. Those communities of San Bruno, Millbrae, Burlingame, and Hillsborough, what is the noise that they're experiencing? The goals were to better understand how ground-based noise propagates through the communities from aircraft departures, and then also to assess the effectiveness of vegetation. Al had mentioned that a little bit earlier, that it was thought maybe if you increase vegetation, that it might reduce ground-based noise from those departures. And here's the model and the results. It's just an example of one of the aircraft departing runway 1 left. When it just begins its takeoff roll, there's the noise it's producing. You can see we put in the buildings that are nearby. On the left, nearby San Francisco Airport, looking at how it propagates up into the hill a little bit. Of course, I'm not really showing the hill here. It doesn't go that far into it, but you can just see there's the noise source. We did look at if you added that vegetation, that green strip on the right, how much it would reduce it. You can see that darker orange that's in that area right there of Millbrae, that it doesn't reduce it by all that much. In fact, what we saw was that it's about 1 dB is what is reduced from those types of operations. And it's worth pointing out that changes of less than 3 decibels are barely perceptible. So in order for you to get perceptible decrease from vegetation, whether it's trees or hedges or forestation of some sort, that the area must be greater than 30 feet wide to provide a noticeable reduction. So now onto the noise measurement program. Purposes, I believe there's 2 of them, show how noise from aircraft departing those runways, 1 left and 1 right again, how that noise propagates into the communities or up the hill, if you will. We've already done that through modeling, but can we show the same information through some measurements and more or less validate some of the modeling that we did? And then also determine whether low frequency noise is different behind the start of takeoff rather than under the flight path. So now we're looking at up the hill versus out the gap. And as I said, I would show a CNEL contour here. Wanted to do that so that you could see the CNEL contours, how it does go into the San Bruno areas and then out the gap there towards what is that, the northwest as it departs. And then arrival noise is out over the bay near Foster City. And then the departure noise from the 01 left and 01 right is actually going out over the bay as well to the northeast. So those are the purposes of the noise measurement program, to actually get some actual noise data. Excuse me. I do want to talk about D weighting versus A weighting. And the reason for that is that, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things we want to accomplish is determine whether low frequency noise is more of a contributor to the noise environment in those adjacent communities rather than those communities out the gap like San Bruno. And so we want to look at both A weighting and C weighting, but I think it's worth knowing the differences between those. And the biggest difference is you can see on the graphic to the right, what that graphic is showing is how much the weighting changes the absolute noise levels as measured. And if you look on the red line, and you can see it above like 1,000 hertz, it increases noise levels between like 1,000 hertz and about 6,000 hertz. And the reason for that increase is that those are the frequencies in which our human ear is good at hearing. And so it actually accentuates those a little bit, but it also then decentuates or reduces the low frequency noise, especially if you see there around 20 to 100 hertz. Those are like 20 to 50 dB reduced, because we really don't hear those sounds well. And that's one of the examples I use. Is that's the reason that the subwoofer industry is doing so well when people are trying to create movie theater type noise in their living rooms, right? You go and buy a subwoofer, because what it does is it adds that like 50 to 20 to 50 dB back in so that you can hear those lower frequency noise. And lastly, what I want to talk about is what's written on the left, is that A weighting is how the human ear perceives noise in our typical environments, whereas C weighting is also how the human ear perceives noise, but in really loud environments. And these environments are more like a really noisy factory where they're doing riveting or things like that inside a closed space, to where you get exposed to much greater than 90 decibels the whole time you're working in that factory, right? It almost never stops. And in places like that, our ear does tend to become more sensitive to those lower frequencies and begins to actually hear them. And this is why the EPA went with A weighting in their recommendations of how to measure and report on the environmental noise, or the noise that we hear in our typical environments. So when we do measurements of both A and C weighting, you can see that the C weighting is going to include just more low frequency noise. And that's one of the purposes of this measurement program, is to see whether C weighting, again, is any more part of the noise in these adjacent communities as compared to through the gap communities where you have direct overflight zone, mostly departure. So knowing how aircraft transmits noise when they're departing, we prepared this graphic to use. The green area there showing the area in which the sound coming from aircraft on departure behind the aircraft, the areas in which it most dominantly transmits the noise. It's not the same everywhere. So the green area is just the areas where the noise will probably be louder and easier to measure. And so we developed those green cones, if you will, as potential measurement area that we want to measure. And the reason we didn't make it green, for instance, around NMT 11, because NMT 11 should substantially measure that area. So we don't want to put another measurement in that circle there, because NMT 11 is essentially, accounting for the noise measured there. And so that's why you see some of the areas like around NMT 8, 9, 10, and 11 as to not where we would put measurements, because, again, those sites already exist.
So
there
Jim,
are,
can you back up
yes,
for a minute?
sure.
On your slide, so your green sections is where the noise is existing through that whole map, but the green is where there's no noise monitors today. Is that what you're saying?
No. The
Okay.
green area is areas in which I am recommending we find places for the noise monitors to measure noise from the start of takeoff roll when they're departing runways 1 left and 1 right. Because if you look at the directivity of an airplane, this is the maximum directivity of the noise. Doesn't mean you're only going to hear it in this area, but if you want to measure that noise, this is your best area in which to get good measurement data.
So the noise from the airport is more concentrated in those areas. Is that what you're saying? That's why we
Yeah.
should measure?
You would get
Okay.
higher noise, you should get higher noise levels in those areas than in the areas not in green.
Okay,
And what you want are the higher noise levels because you already have ambient noise levels and you want to be above those ambient noise levels. And so this is the area in which you would better have a chance of measuring that. Good question though. Thanks for asking that, because that needs to be clear as to why, what those green areas represent. Okay, so there are really 4 things that I feel we need out of this meeting. I think some of them are probably already been answered. And we'll go through each of these. But the first one is to determine the four measurement locations to place the portable noise monitors. San Francisco has offered up to 4 portables for this purpose. I think we should do all 4. And then we also want to determine the fixed noise monitors that as part of the monitoring system to obtain data during the same time period as the portable noise measurements. And again, those are going to be to measure the noise that those that I showed in the map before, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and 13, but also through the gap, because we want to see what the differences are to assess whether or not the CNEL contours are adequately representing the noise in this area. And to do that, you have to see, what the similar results are in area out the gap or where they're getting those direct overflights. So we'll have several fixed noise monitors that we want similar data from, determine the data to be collected, and then determine the duration and dates for the portable noise measurement program. This has been, we've been trying for, well over a year to try to get these portable noise measurements set up. I realize it's not a straightforward, easy task to find these 4 sites, make sure they're secure, make sure they're going to actually measure what it is we're trying to measure, which is the start of takeoff roll noise. So hopefully at the end of this meeting, we have agreed on all 4 of these. So now what I want to do is walk through these 4 requirements. And I'm actually going to ask Bert, I'll give you a little bit heads up, to discuss the potential and low potential monitoring sites that are there. But this is, again, what we want to do is I would hope not leave this meeting without agreeing to where we're going to actually do the measurements. My recommendation is actually on the teal blue color dots, if you can. Those are the ones that are more highly recommended than the ones in yellow. But Bert, do you have anything you want to add there? Or I think 3 out of the 4 you've already found actual addresses and where you're actually going to put them. So anything you have, Bert, now's the time.
No, thank you, Gene. I appreciate it. So we're given Central Park in Millbrae as a possibility at the gardens there. It's very public. We're a little nervous about that one. Only for that, and would definitely be on battery power. The next one in that same area, in that wedge there, would be the Harry Tracy Water Treatment Plant. We went out there, did a site visit, found a beautiful location. You have perfect line of sight to the end of the runways, and you can hear the departure noise. NMT 9 would be at the right side of that wedge, and we'll go ahead with that one. NMT 8, right in between the 2, close into the airport there, is a bit difficult. I mean, we can use it, but it's a bit difficult to get real solid, clear noise from it. It's in Millbrae, off the Millbrae Corporation Yard Road, and gets a lot of reflected noise off the new buildings there, and tends to be a subpar site, we'll say. It's just the freeway noise, everything else just kind of makes it not very good.
Makes it harder to tell which noise is the airport noise versus Just the neighborhood noise?
versus neighborhood versus freeway, or
Mhm.
you name it. It's
Okay.
just kind of a difficult one. Jump up above that one to the retention pond. We thought about that one, because on airport, closest to the source of the sound and the power up would be a really good site to have. We'll be happy to place a monitor there. And then dropping down into the green wedge there, we have NMT 11. Right in the midpoint, kind of the equivalent to the Central Park site. NMT 10's kind of at the hairy edge there. May or may not want that, your choice. It's always gathering data, so it's potential. We looked at Hoover and Roosevelt elementary schools. Due to the geography out there, we don't think they're ideal sites. That's why we put them as low potential. And then if we bounded down to the very bottom there at NMT 13, that's a permanent site. And think it's a fine site, does get some low frequency there. And then the other one we thought, if you wanted to balance it, might be Crocker Middle School. So need to figure out if we're gonna go with that, or if we need to go find something else in between or around Hoover and Roosevelt.
And the problems with Hoover and Roosevelt are,
Geography, it's just really kind of hard to. They're in valleys and
Low
such,
point.
so yeah, we're trying to get something that's sort of even terrain. The other one that is problematic with them is it would be a rooftop placement. We're not really supposed to be going up and down ladders with airplane, so we try to stay away from rooftop placements.
So right now, the pinkish dots, those are existing monitors that are there, but that wouldn't necessarily be used for our study, but they could be used for our
I
study.
think Gene does want to use them, yes,
Okay.
and we would give that data over, yeah.
Okay, because you talked about their effectiveness for this study, but I wasn't sure if you were intending for those to be left out of
Not at all.
the study material. And then the retention pond area. Now, when noise comes off the back of a plane,
Mhm.
it goes into 45 is what
Pretty
is,
much.
is the general. Although other winds and things can carry it other directions.
Yes, ma'am.
So that is not too close in to not be getting the full effect.
It would be able to get the initial sound pulse too, as well as the noise going down the runway. So it could be used, depending on how the analysis went, as, say, a trigger monitor. Where you would say, okay, so we have this sound at the airport, and then with so many milliseconds later, it occurs out in the community at the other sites. That would be a good way to say, yes, that's definitely airport noise.
Okay,
In addition to that, I'd also say that it's also one of the sites, the only site that's actually inside the 65 CNEL contour. So again, I think that would be a good site to have to show what the noise levels are inside the 65 CNEL.
Which one is that? Is that the retention pond?
Yes, at the very top, middle.
Gotcha. Says, I see, do we have any monitors in Burlingame per se? I see Millbrae and I see Hillsborough, which is 13, and Crocker would be Hillsborough,
11
Is it
Yeah, I think
11?
11 is,
Circle.
is in Burlingame, inside Burlingame. Okay.
yes.
And where's that one at again, 11?
It's at a school,
Lincoln Elementary, I'm gonna guess,
Lincoln?
it's,
where my son went, I think that's the
I
location.
think it is, yeah,
If it's not Hoover or Roosevelt, then it's Lincoln, right?
I think it's Lincoln.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. And by the way, these, just in case we increase, these monitors have been there, for a while. There's no concerns over safety issues on these monitors, right? There's been nobody ever complaining about, radiation or anything out of the monitors.
They don't radiate.
They don't really. I only asked that because we had cell towers in Hillsborough and we had tons of concerns over safety issues on cell towers.
Okay.
That's never been an issue with noise monitors, correct?
When we went over to our new system, they're all cellular, so no more than a cell phone.
No more than a
It's a
cell phone.
cellular modem.
Gotcha, okay. I just anticipating. any questions.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Good. The rest of
Yeah,
So it seems like Central Park in Millbrae would be a good choice. You said it's concerns because it's very public, you're worried about it getting,
security,
with.
yeah, it's just, there is a park and then there's gardens right out there in the middle.
I've heard talking that the sound is from the airport's pretty strong at City Hall. Would City Hall be a better location than Central Park?
If we could find a site that is, I mean, I know where City Hall is, and since we have our meetings right there at the library.
Or
I,
like in that complex, yeah, by the library, by the City Hall? How big are the monitors?
it's basically a suitcase and a video tripod.
Okay. It's a low roof.
Well, I was also thinking about, so
Public Works
to the
does
right
that.
of the security room, as you're facing with the library on the left, there is that structure, house.
Historical house?
Oh, the
Yeah,
historical house?
the area behind it
I was wondering about
is a
that. That's like adjacent to it.
possibility,
Mhm.
that might offer a little more security. I don't know. I mean, it's up to you guys to,
Yeah, I can talk to the city manager and Public Works.
yeah, and we'd probably be able to get power
Yes.
there.
Yes.
We had talked at one time, Bert, about, City Hall in Hillsborough on that, and it was ruled out because of ambient noise, because it's right up.
Right off the
That's
roadway
not a
there.
concern.
Yeah,
Um,
because we're the, put it back roads.
back.
Yeah, it's removed a bit, so
It-
it's pretty good.
It is right next to our police and fire, but that's probably.
Well, I mean,
mm,
those are easily weeded out.
Yeah, okay.
Unless we keep getting those
Yeah.
during noise events, then we're
Yeah.
gonna have to say, yeah, it's
Okay.
contaminated.
Mhm.
But contaminate doesn't throw out everything. It just makes getting the data more difficult to extract it. Or
Well,
to
you might have
delete
to
that.
just say it's a contaminated event, it's no good.
But there could be, out of 200 events, it could be like 10 that are contaminated.
Sure.
Or,
Okay.
Could I, on Burlingame, there's a lot of development proposed for Rollins Road. Are we, does it make sense to have a monitor down there, or are we covering that noise from these other monitors?
We looked at Rollins Road and it's kind of a desert, as far as noise monitoring goes. We tried to look for anything that might be open. We also want to be equidistant away from the tallest object.
Mhm.
So if you have a 20-foot high building, you have to be 20 feet away from it. You don't want to get the reflectivity off the building as much as possible. So those things. And there's a lot of concrete out there, which does give reflectivity. And a lot of businesses, some taller buildings.
So any results we get today could be significantly different if it's converted to residential from what's the commercial, is that what you're saying?
Could be.
So,
yeah.
results today could be misleading because of all the concrete, all the buildings. The way they-
Potential, I mean, but then again, right there at Rollins Road and Millbrae Ave, there's some big structures going in.
Hotels.
Yeah,
just as someone new on the, roundtable,
please.
what's just the inventory of all the monitors that currently exist? Not locations, but there's 3 types of monitors. There's the permanent
Mhm.
and then portable and some. I'm slowly retaining it all.
Yeah, you're doing well. So
Um,
basically, we have a permanent monitor and we have a portable monitor.
Okay, and how many
And
permanent
the-
monitors are there
29.
currently? 29, and is that just
San
within San
Francisco
Mateo
down to
County?
Redwood City.
Okay,
and those are regulated by the title.
The ones that validate or verify the endpoints of the noise contour are the ones that are considered to be Title 21 monitors.
And they're safe to say, they've got to stay.
We have to have a threshold on them is why. And those are the ones that we work with the consultants to find the best threshold for it. So we get the most amount of events, the least amount of garbage. And it works well for the community as well as the airport. Now, the others, we have a lot of latitude with. We can do what we're doing now, which we're actually doing both on both. We report on 12 specific ones for Title 21. And we make sure that those have the thresholds like the state wants. The other methodology we use is called ANEEM. And the ANEEM uses a modeled component to extract that aircraft noise. And really does a good job pulling it out of the community. One of the nice things that we did find is we're going through looking at NPD, noise power distance, and ANEEM is that with the thresholds that we selected, they're pretty close. In the quieter areas, ANEEM can actually pull out some really quiet airplanes. It's amazing.
So if I can just understand, of the 12 noise monitors that you use to validate the Title 21 data that's required, those are also reporting them using a name?
Yes, if you look at our director's report.
And that's in the
both.
director's report. That
We
was
do
the
both,
final.
yes.
So, okay, great.
And then of the portable ones, there's how many?
We have 8 portables total. And we have a circuit that we do, it's called permanent portables,
Mhm.
meaning that we go there all the time, once a quarter, every year, 4 times a year. And the others are ad hoc monitors that we do based on people calling, saying, I'd like to have a noise monitor in my yard. And we will then go ahead and see if they are close to an existing monitor,
Mhm.
or if we've done a report nearby recently, we'll offer them that.
Okay. And are those ad hoc and permanent portals both part of the 8 total?
Mhm.
Okay. And then these 4, are they part of the 8 portables that we're just moving for this project, or are they
We
for an
have-
addition?
Of the 8 portables that we have,
Mhm.
we have allocated 4 to the Roundtable to do for their noise monitoring,
Okay,
if they wish. And we deal with the others based on our needs and the ad hoc needs.
okay.
And then we
Really
also
helpful.
have right upcoming for the GBAS service survey and monitoring. We're pulling some of those portables to be able to do that work, correct?
We'll commit those, yes.
Thank
So
you.
they may not be as available for other projects
Well,
for the
we'll-
time
we'll
being
just
that
try to work
GBAS is
with
doing.
the Roundtable and the communities. We just need to sit down and say, okay, here's the time where the FAA and the airlines are gonna be able to do the tests. We'll go ahead and put the word out and see if we can take care of our monitoring before or after.
Is that anytime soon? What's the latest?
Right now, we are getting word that everything got punted a year.
So the GBAS actual monitoring might not be for a year from now?
What's the GBAS?
Ground based.
Ground-
That is great. That's
Augmentation
Oh,
system.
different.
Unrelated to ground based
Ground
noise.
based,
Totally
okay.
unrelated.
Another ground base.
It's
Very
bringing in
confusing.
landings
Okay.
and
Yes.
it's bringing them in a controlled way so that there could be noise reduction.
Mhm.
It could also be noise condensing, but we don't know that yet.
Bert and Jean, one of the objectives is measuring the difference between up the hill, which these monitors will do, and out the gap. So we've got the data for up the gap, right? We don't need anything to gather that data, that's there. We're just focusing on this up the hill, because we don't think that data is complete. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's.
But
So-
we need the data from the existing monitors.
Yes.
So Gene needs that as well. So they know that.
Okay.
So out of all these dots, we're looking to find 4 placements. that aren't on orange dots.
I would take it a little different. These dots that are on here, minus the orange dots.
Say that
are
again?
just- Are, so the dots that are on here are currently recommendations. What we want to do is determine today whether we can put these as potential to actually put them as, yes, that's what we want. And it can be anywhere, again, along those green areas. It doesn't have to be in them. Like the retention pond you see there isn't actually in that, because we were also focusing outside the 65, but I do like the idea of having one inside the 65. And so anywhere, but these are the places that I think we've gotten to through, the roundtable and Bert's looking at potential sites. So I did like the discussion about the City Hall versus Central Park. But what we want to do is, again, leave this meeting knowing that the 4 will be approximately where we show them today. And so the 4 that I think we're sort of recommending are the teal ones, where we might actually move Central Park to City Hall. I think that's worth evaluating. Otherwise, I'm hoping that we can just go with those 4 teal dots.
And City Hall, how far would that move the dot?
Not
Can you
far.
see where it says Magnolia on the sheet?
Next
Yeah.
to the
Like,
45 degrees.
Right next to the 45 degrees.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just bring it in
It's-
6 blocks or so.
Yeah, it's not even,
Okay.
yeah, or I guess maybe depending on how deep of the park it was,
Well,
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that it'd still give a good equidistance between the retention pond and the Harry Traceman water treatment facility, if that's a possibility.
On the Crocker School, Bert, that was discussed with, the school and the town. That one? or-
not at the moment.
Not-
We
not yet.
did evaluations
Yeah.
and we don't want to go raise any hackles until
Gotcha.
we've got a site, and then we'll go talk to him.
Okay.
In Millbrae, do we hear a lot of feedback from residents this far up the hill, or is this just to give like the true full distance and a midway?
It was,
Like, what's
yeah,
the,
I would say the latter. We do get complaints out there, yes.
okay,
Most of them are actually more towards San Bruno.
more towards this way?
Yeah,
Is there a site that goes this way a little bit that provides that? Or is this the next spot?
based on that wedge, the green
Mhm.
wedge,
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the best. Wouldn't
Okay.
you agree, Gene?
I couldn't see where you were going. the
Oh.
others.
Harry Tracy or left more towards, the edge of San Bruno, you can see where that, borderline goes and it bumps out there and goes
Oh,
to
yeah.
the legend. She was looking out in that area.
Yeah, and I think either, but I just think the treatment plant is probably a more secure, just, and it's not going to be very much difference between those 2 areas.
Okay. Is the radius of these monitors about the same as the permanent monitors that we see on the map?
They have the same microphone and equipment, yes.
Yeah, they're identical.
Well, obviously, then the City Hall site would give a better coverage if you were to add that size circle there.
Yeah, because the
Um,
Central Park's pretty close to the NMT now.
You do a lot of overlap of the noise there, although, it could be that depending on how the sound projects or what is blocking the sound currently,
Mhm.
or not blocking it, you'd get different results, but if we could try to get City Hall, that'd probably be better.
Mhm.
And these are for 2 weeks, right? The new ones.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just one round of 2 weeks?
Mhm.
Is there like when you think of bad weather versus hot weather or holidays or, busy travel times, things like that? How well do we understand that if it's only 2 weeks?
We have a slide coming up. Can we delay that
Okay,
conversation until we get to that?
okay.
So if we use the 4 teal dots that are here, and I'm happy to make that recommendation. with, and having it moved to City Hall if possible. But have a backup that we could do it at the Millbrae Park if need be. Can we get an agreement on that?
Mhm.
I'm fine with that.
Mhm. Is the Central Park conversation with Millbrae City the same as Crocker with Hillsborough?
Actually, Ann Schneider offered up the Central Park.
Oh, okay,
Building,
great. So that's already started. Okay. Great.
and I believe she was in communication with the city
city
staff
staff.
that
Okay.
would be
Yeah.
helping us out on that.
Okay, great.
So,
So are we going to,
Linda Wollen's question.
pardon?
She's just.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes. I just wanted to point out, I'm totally fine with this recommendation too, but just in case residents from Burlingame are curious about the decision-making process, perhaps include in the notes for this meeting that the 2 locations were considered in Burlingame, what were deemed unsuitable for the reasons that Bert described, just so that's noted in the record.
That's a great comment, because I can see somebody saying, how come you're ignoring us?
Right, precisely. Thank you.
Again, I just want to reiterate on the schools, we're talking 2 weeks and we're talking the summertime. So we're not talking would be a major inconvenience to them if somebody had a concern, which I'm hopeful they would, but just for the record.
So is there some way that, with the understanding that Terry just stated about the 3 ones, that 4th one could get enough direction here today that would help us not have to come back again? I'm not sure exactly how that would read, whether it's you like, if Hoover, Roosevelt, or somewhere in that kind of vicinity would come available, that would be good. Where else were you looking at for the 4th one?
We have 4 right now.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, is that enough?
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
So my offering on that one, we thought about that. Thank you for bringing that up. Was, let's say for some reason we were denied at Crocker. There was an open space park sort of over there. We were thinking about seeing if we could find something there. Or go back to Hoover, Roosevelt, and see if we could pull something together.
Could you
So
identify
we're
where
asking
the
for,
park-
you to give us the latitude on that.
Where the park is relative to Crocker? See it on the map.
Just 1 minute. Let me get a,
So sort of approve maybe if we can, a general, a more general area.
They're running out of time here, so.
yeah, I believe it was in between the 2. There was an open space park over there.
Is it Corner Dolphins? No.
I don't have it on this map with my notes, but yeah, so we could pull something together for that if we had the latitude, just
So it's sort of like southeast of Crocker.
I would say somewhere in between the triangle, closer towards Hoover and Roosevelt.
Oh, okay, the park, okay. So a possible park location.
yeah, I'd be happy giving that recommendation with the leadway if we find it more suitable.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm happy to, consult with Bert as well if you want.
Oh, I definitely
you know,
bounce it off of Eugene.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear that I'd be more than happy to work with. I just don't want to have to come back to the roundtable to, move it 2 blocks.
That's why I was bringing it up. I wanted to get that leeway if we needed it.
Yep, exactly. So it sounds like we're good.
I think we are, so that was item 2 that we discussed.
Yeah, I have future slides for the rest of them. So want me to continue?
Sure.
Just one item really quick. I know this is in the conversation, but if there's another time or place to have a follow-up conversation about NMT8, because I know this neighborhood, I mean, you just hear the engines revving
Mhm.
all the time, so I don't know if we could just kind of look at this whole area, but another conversation to maybe
Oh,
look at
definitely.
that sometime.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's a
I'd,
roundtable discussion. or-
Mentioned that before, and it would be definitely going either
Yeah,
left or putting something permanently near the retention.
This would be a good opportunity to test out the retention pond, location to see if that
Mhm.
helps.
Hmm.
That very close in Millbrae area.
Okay, Jean,
Okay. So the next item was to talk about the permanent monitors that we want data for, for the same time period. And, I'm suggesting, number 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13, knowing that 8 is suspect and we may not get good information. Might as well see if we can get anything from that. And then I'm also recommending out the gap monitors 1, 4, and 18. And just wanted to first touch base with Bert. Is that okay? Is it too many? Because I know there's going to be some, you are the ones that have to go get the data and provide it to us. So just wanted to be sure you're okay with that number. So what is
Oh,
that?
we
1,
can
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think is 8 total.
Yeah, so 1, 4, and 6,
1, 4, and 18 actually.
18, sorry.
and you're talking about out the Geneva Gap. Or are you talking, where are you talking out the gap?
Inline runway heading,
280.
so
Okay.
1.
Can you see
4,
my
8,
cursor?
Yeah, out the gap,
San Bruno Gap.
yeah. That's what I assumed you meant, that's,
So just to recap, it's 1, 4, and 18 for the gap, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13 for the uphill.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
And Bert, you said you were okay with that number?
I am, yeah, we can
Okay.
just give you that data in a heartbeat.
Yep, thank you. And is the subcommittee okay with those as well? And again, the purpose of the ones out the gap is to compare low frequency in terms of C weighting, and the difference between C and A out the gap versus the difference between C and A, in the adjacent communities.
Yeah, I'll trust you to, from my perspective, I trust your judgment on the up the gap. I'm not familiar with those.
Yep, understood. But you can see where they're located. 2 of them are inside the 70 or the 65 CNEL, and then 1 is beyond the 65 CNEL. So just trying to get for under the aircraft on departure, right? Because that's where the contour on the land is at, right? As opposed to the water. So we're trying to compare what low frequency content is in the noise out the gap versus the low frequency content behind start and takeoff roll.
Good.
Okay. Okay. Then the data collection, I'm proposing that we look at the single event noise exposure level, or SDNEL, values for aircraft departing those runways in both A and C weighting. And that we do 2 weeks. Next opportunity, I think, is early July. I did put a question there because I think we alluded to this a little bit, is how different are the weather conditions or how busy the airport is, those sorts of things. I can tell you that for this study, we don't need a super busy period. It can be a less busy period or a super busy. It doesn't matter. We'll just get, because we just need several departures off of the ones and do the analysis on it. And so I don't think that is a factor. What could be a factor though are winds and temperature inversions. Now, temperature inversions for ground-based noise sources have a tremendous effect on how the sound propagates up the hill. Because a temperature inversion, what it does is there would be this layer a couple thousand feet up from the surface that acts as a barrier and projects the noise back down rather than continuing out into the atmosphere. So probably temperature inversions are one of the things that would be nice to have that information, because I think we're going to get higher noise levels up at the top of the hill than we would without a temperature inversion. And then the other factor I said was wind, but wind is more of a factor of whether or not they're using the ones, or if they have to turn the airport around and use, the other runways rather than departing them. So in July, what are the chances of us getting standard operations, your normal flow of operations? And I think this is a question for Bert. And then also in July, are we likely or unlikely to get conditions with temperature inversions?
You're talking fog, correct? Basically.
No.
Not necessarily. It can, but it doesn't have to be fog. So go ahead.
Right.
Bert, you were going to say.
The temperature inversion, if you looked east and you see that nice brown mud layer hanging in the sky out there, and the air's pretty still, that's a temperature inversion. It's allowing the smog to stop right there. And that, as Gene mentioned, actually like a lid on a bowl. It just reflects sound back and forth. And so, as far as your question goes, operations, the taxiway realignment and runway closures should be done by July 1st. 4th of July is usually a decent travel period. So it'd be a fair amount of traffic. And then, the inversions, we don't collect inversion data. But, if the winds are calm and we get, an inversion, it can stay and are usually quite thick.
Common in July,
We have potential for them.
potential.
Yeah, because in the spring and the falls, typically when we get those nice westerly breezes that make all the traffic go west out the gap or tight right turn. So we'll be right at the tail end of that. So potential for inversion.
And having a couple inversion days would be good, wouldn't it?
Could be if that's what you'd like to measure, sure.
Well, it's not required, but it is something that would be a nice to have, because people have always said some days I hear the airport way more than other days, yet the airport hasn't gone anywhere those days. I don't hear them as well. And really the reason for the change in perception of hearing it is, I believe, due to temperature inversions. So it'd be nice to have, again, not required to have.
Yeah, all right, well, potential's there.
So I don't know if it was temperature inversion days, but certainly when it's thick fog, I hear it way different in Brisbane than I do when it's a clear night. It lasts longer. It's more vibrating. And so it's that weightier sound.
And temperatures can occur during fog conditions. I'm just saying it's not, people sometimes, I don't want people to think, oh, it's foggy, it's going to be a temperature inversion. That's not the case. Bert's correct. It can occur during those times. So.
Well, as long as we think we're gonna get a good data set from doing it in early July, and that Bert can have the leadway as long as the runway closures aren't in effect. Still. Then that time period would be fine with me.
How often are the portable monitors usually moved?
The ones that are done on a permanent portable basis. Those are done once a quarter
Mhm.
for 2 weeks. And then we try to stagger those so that we,
Get 4 different quarters.
Yeah,
well, we
And
do
then
the
we're
4
not
different
collecting
quarters,
data
but we're
with-
not doing all 4 at the same time.
and then you're not collecting and reviewing data for the whole quarter, just 2 weeks?
Yeah, under Title 21, you can actually monitor same location,
Mhm.
same period of time, once a quarter. And it is equivalent of permanent monitor.
You know, if the, once we get the data, assuming there's no inversion in July during the time period.
Mhm.
Once we get the data and see what it says, nothing precludes us from doing this again later in the year to measure inversion in that. If we think that that would give some data that we want to draw some action from. And I don't think, be nice to have, I agree with Terry, it'd be nice to have a couple days of inversion now, but if we didn't. That's not, we can always go back and do it again, can we not?
I believe so, yes. We would have to, if we're doing that, I would want to, get some, NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration data. So that we can really try to buttonhole some good.
Because what we've been saying is we think the differential, if there is a difference in the data from up the hill and down. We'd be saying that that difference would be, as human, would be greater than an inversion. Which we would probably know intuitively, so I guess all we're trying to do is test that premise. That the action that might come might be the same as the action without the data. What I'm trying to get to, so we can determine that once we see the result is.
Understood.
Does that make sense? I mean, yeah, okay.
Just kind of Googling all we're doing is to find this, and it seems clear, everybody seems to say, and we probably know empirically, that June through August is our foggiest time of year.
June through August. Oh, okay.
So this might turn out to be.
The coldest summer in San Francisco.
But it's not they said it's not necessarily the fog, it's the temperature change from hot to cold.
Right, but I think yes, but fog often is part of that.
Accompanies it.
Associated.
Can, doesn't need to, but can
Mhm.
accompany that.
Smog or fog.
I can't find, I tried to find best months for temperature inversions, but that wasn't working, so I went with fog after that.
I know,
Can I ask one more before we get off this? The SCNEL, is that the measurement there? Would we get a different result if you use a different metric? I mean, would it be different data that would be useful to us? Would noise above make any difference in our conclusions there? Or supplementary metric? After you think not?
Direct it to Jean.
Okay.
Yeah, so the quick answer is no. The different metrics, like there's maximum sound level, there's sound exposure or single event noise exposure level or SCNEL. They're all using the same A-weighted or C-weighted data. It's just SCNEL, the reason I'm wanting that is that's the total noise energy of the event, whereas Lmax is just how loud it got. And so we can certainly use Lmax instead of SCNEL, but I would like to just say that my recommendation is SCNEL. And again, all the metrics use the same basis. And so the fact that we're doing both A and C, I would recommend SCNEL.
Okay.
and in using that noise metric, it would be NPD data that we'd be using. Noise power distance versus MU. And the reason for that is with SCNEL, we're gonna have a threshold, the time, and the noise level.
So this gives us the threshold, the time, and the noise level.
Mhm.
Does give us the noise level, okay. Okay.
I'm just new and learning. I like to ask a lot of questions. Sometimes it puts people in the defensive, so I don't get to do it. I just want to learn. So like each quarter when we do the portable monitors, do we just leave them there for 2 weeks and then you take them out of that location until it's time for a new one, or do you leave them there for the quarter? No, you just
2
do
weeks.
it for 2 weeks for the.
The only one that we
Okay.
have been doing that with, and
Mhm.
it's not preferred, is the Woodside VOR, which is the navigation aid. First of all, the FAA has been very helpful to us over the years in placing monitors there, but it's getting harder to coordinate our schedules for replacement. So we asked them if we could just leave it there, and they said, oh, that's easy, great, yeah, just leave it.
The FAA happens to control the area where that one is.
Oh, yes,
Okay.
that's,
It's, just happens to be the FAA.
yeah.
And I would also add that when we do noise measurements, we're typically doing a full week, meaning you get, you know, say you start Sunday night, then you get all of Monday through all of the next Sunday. That's typically what we do. So San Francisco's program of doing 2 weeks just ensures that you will have at least that, but then even a little bit more. So I think San Francisco's protocol of doing 2 weeks is sufficient and probably even more than sufficient. So anyway, I just think it's probably a good practice, and that's why I didn't feel the need to change their protocol for this data collection, except for collecting the sea weight stuff.
Okay, so.
So are we good on this?
I think
This
we're good
part
on
here, are we
this.
good with this?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes,
So I'm sorry, what are the dates? Oh, that was the data. We haven't done the dates yet.
well, I think that we're okay with the early July as long as the runways are back in operation.
My
Give
theory
it some
was
leeway,
to
sort of,
Yeah.
you know, like the month of July.
Month of July
1st.
is fine.
see if we could coordinate getting them out day before it opens up or something like that. That way we're rolling.
Last time they did this maintenance, they were scheduled for like a holiday weekend and they were up and running like 3 days ahead of time.
Correct.
So if we could give them a minus 1 week to plus 3 weeks or something.
I think that's fine.
Something like that. Most,
I'm not gonna be out putting them there, so go for it.
Well, here's the deal. If we get out there a week early, I'll wait till July 1st, so you get your 2 weeks. I'm not gonna short you.
oh, well,
So-
just give us extra then, that'd be great.
Well, it's nice to have padding on either side in
Yeah.
case something hiccups or whatever else,
Okay.
yes.
And then would it be ideal to have the holidays within that 2 week period?
I know Ann wanted to have a heavier period of time of travel.
Mhm.
Whether it be Labor Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Christmas, whatever.
Yeah.
She wanted something big in there. And this would
Okay.
satisfy that if that's what you guys want.
Okay, so we can give that flexibility with the opening and then say the ideal would be if we can get that holiday.
To be sure
Okay.
we're catching that. yeah.
Yeah. I know it's very close to the first, so.
All right. Sounds like we're
Right.
good then. And
I
Bert
think
has
we're
some
good.
Bert has some leeway as to when they actually get them installed, but around that first 2 weeks. Okay.
So are we moving on to Bert SFO airport noise update?
We sort of,
Or did we
I
already?
we sort of combined, I think, that, all
We
I
did.
think we
Right.
merged our two items,
which was great.
which is, I was gonna talk about where we looked at, and we've already talked about that.
And that was
Okay.
my doing. Sorry about that. I just wanted to be sure. I
that's
left
okay.
this meeting with everything I think we needed. So thank you.
We aren't really going off of, we're a little loose and free flowing at this type of meeting, and that's good because we have a small enough group that we can do that. Are there,
Madam Chair, there are no public participants, right? So-
There are none at this time,
Unless Linda has something to say.
and no raised hand at the moment.
Okay.
that's what I was trying to see if anybody wanted to have any questions or any of the members' questions that want to follow up on. And then we've already done determined the placement of the 4 portable noise monitors. We've done that, determined the dates. We don't have any public that wants to speak. And no one online. So member suggestions for future ground-based noise subcommittee topics. One of the things that has been brought to my attention is the SFO sea level rise project and what noise that may change from it. So it might be interesting to hear about that in the future and what kind of products are gonna be going in at what heights and how that might change things. And we'll hear from Bert perhaps another meeting. Is that acceptable to Bert when we get a little further along in that process?
We'd have to see when we could provide that. I know that talked to our staff about that. We have the what do you call it? CEQA study that's been done and presented around to the cities, so it's in the bag. Most of the information is contained in there already and has been presented. There's a NEPA that's going on right now. And the other interesting part of it is there are different entities doing different sections of seawall around the bay. So some of these are gonna end up stepping on each other's toes and not being the same as
My
another.
wall's higher than your wall.
You got it.
Or where
So,
they meet, and if they meet.
or do they meet?
Yeah, or do they meet?
It's like, oh no, here's the
Yeah.
gap, you put your
Yeah.
finger in it.
Right, so, yeah, let's let the entities finish doing their thing right
Okay,
now.
well, this was at a future meeting that we
Oh,
were
it
talking
definitely
about
would be
it,
in
and
the
that might
future,
be 6
yeah.
months or 4 months down the road before we have another one.
I know the airport just finished a strategic plan. Is there any components of that that relates to this?
Ground-based noise? No, not at the moment.
Okay, well, if anyone has a topic they'd like to discuss,
The other thing I might add, and this gets along with the question just asked, is there any major construction being proposed to the airport in the next, on the docket, or being considered that might impact, noise reflection that we should be aware of, I guess? And that for a different day, but that may be a topic, if there's any reconstruction, reconfiguration of the airport.
Well, the airport's always.
I know.
got
Trying to
things
think of
going
something
on.
that's materially different, but.
Right now, I can't think of anything
Okay.
that would be counter. I know there's the let's see, Terminal H they're talking about?
Terminal 8,
H.
H.
a new terminal.
And that would be helpful to the community, I believe, because it would be where do you mind? Hey, Gene, do you mind throwing up that map near the airport with the contour?
Oh, yeah, the one showing the contour and the monitoring site.
Yeah,
Yeah, give me just a second.
probably shut down and everything already, sorry.
Nope, I didn't. I was about to though, so you caught me just in time, I think.
How about the other one is a little closer zoomed in
The portable one?
earlier?
6 noise monitoring locations.
Yeah, so, it's at the very top there. You can just see the notch in the roadways there. It's supposed to go along there, which would actually keep sound towards the airport.
So you're talking about heading towards the north.
Yeah,
So the building would be between a lot of the noise and the community. So you think it would,
Yeah, I
Block
do,
it.
yeah.
except for the ones, depending on how the gates are oriented, but I think you've showed us.
McDonald Road, yeah, I showed it to you before,
I
yes.
think you showed it at a previous meeting, yeah.
So on McDonald Road, it's supposed to come off of Terminal G, which is the current international, and it's supposed to build up and reflect noise back towards the airport, so good on that end.
That's good. to hear.
Is it going to be in another international type terminal?
No, I believe it's supposed to be a smaller aircraft. But this one, yeah.
Unmanned droney thing.
No, not there yet.
Good.
You had mentioned the development along the water in Burlingame and all of those.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of looking at sound and the seawall, maybe looking at
We,
potential
um,
sound
yeah.
with those.
You
I
know,
don't know how
the
much you can project at this point.
interesting thing about that is that's under control of the towns, the cities. So presumably they're doing the analysis, but it could have an impact on noise, and presumably they're aware of that when they're having their town hall discussions on it. I'm reminded at the UC Davis symposium, there was a great question asked on, by the council, by the supervisor from Santa Clara about why do towns let people build homes next to airports? And the response was, it's a good question, but people gotta live somewhere, but it's up to the towns to do their part too. Just not all in the airports, and I thought she handled, trying to find the right balance. But there's a joint responsibility there, so.
There definitely is, and I find it as a noise office manager, it's kind of difficult where you think that, oh, hey, great, these communities decided to put transit hubs right next to the airport. Makes great sense, come and go, noise compatible. And then they decide they want to build a high density residential right there too. And it's like, we could have done a better decision than that one.
It's
But-
unfortunate
Here we
because
come.
so many of our cities, that's where our
Well,
land is.
Right, no, I understand
Yeah.
that, I understand, but I would think that the state who is gonna be reviewing the applications to build and everything would be the one that would be smart and say, hey, guys, we need to have a better balance here, or we don't need to pound on the airport quite as hard if we're gonna allow this to happen right there.
And I believe at the last Airport Land Use Commission meeting, they were saying in the next round of RENA, which is another 8 years from now, when they look at cities and capacity, they're gonna exclude some of the areas in the airport land use areas. So,
Fine.
do I
I'm-
recall that incorrectly?
I'm not sure that's what was said.
Oh,
I
okay,
don't know if you recall, I
Maybe I
didn't
recall
quite
it.
hear that.
okay,
Right now, the, Department of Housing really doesn't care where they plot the suitability maps at all. I mean, we have toxic waste dumps and a tank farm they think are great for housing,
Yeah,
so.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And our
Yeah.
lagoon,
yeah, just fill it, just fill it.
With those stilts up.
it's pretty incredible. What they think, but what happens, happens. The other thing that may come up in ground-based noise that we're probably I'm being too quick on the draw for a future meeting, would be the impact of the unmanned drones and those kind of flights. And I know that we haven't gotten it worked out in the big picture yet on what is gonna be allowed and what's not gonna be allowed. But I think that some of the ground-based noise is going to be coming from those, especially at takeoff, where they're using different speeds and
Yeah.
sounds than what we're gonna be seeing, on an airplane and, predicted paths when these are gonna be little buzzing swarms.
And
On
really
that-
varying
on that
launch
topic.
locations.
Yeah, on that topic, you may wanna consider, finding out if any local cities are trying to do vertiports or something like that. Cause my understanding is that all sorts of conversations are going on all over the place.
You know, and it really, I'm assuming for cities, it's gonna make a difference whether they can monetize it. How do they monetize it for the benefit of the city? And if it's worth it to their people, I mean. I know that the higher pitch sound, the whooshy whiny sound is way different than a lot of other noises. I mean, it might be like a electric leaf blower, but when it's going across, you know, your backyard, it's like, whoa.
There'll be.
Oh,
Please
sorry.
go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was just gonna say, to follow up, to say that the next two regular roundtable meetings, we're gonna have guest speakers. Next meeting will be Matthew Friedman from, the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, their aeronautical planning department, and, he's an expert in the emerging
Everything
technology.
thrown.
So, but I'm going to mention those two kind of topics to him to see if he can address those specifically. And then in the August meeting, we have someone from NASA coming. One of two speakers, they're debating between the two who's gonna take the call, take the assignment. But they're both, very expert in psychoacoustics and how acoustic sounds actually are perceived by people, and then they are working with, others in, industry to address those concerns, and industry is interested in that. So that should be very interesting to see how the
To
sound.
me, it's sort of like the mosquito at night.
Mhm.
You don't really notice it until you do. And then that's all you can hear. And it's not very loud, but boy, is it annoying.
I think our focus this year was to do these, information seminars before at every roundtable to bring the awareness level up. And then we'll have to figure out what we do and who does what and what the abilities are. But your point, Bert, is there's more than just the sound of these flying over the skies, these taxis and all the rest of it. There's also the ground-based sound wherever those ports are put in every town. That's a different element.
And they're saying they're gonna have to put them everywhere to be able to recharge.
Everywhere.
Because these
So,
things aren't gonna have a long flight time, because they're gonna be super light except for whatever they're carrying. So, you know, they're not gonna have great distances, so. It'll be interesting to see how that all will be in the age of the Jetsons. For those old of us to know who the Jetsons were.
So, but if anyone thinks of other, particular issues that you want to see addressed in either the advanced air mobility topic or anything else that
That's a
we,
great question.
because I try to work with these speakers to make them understand what our particular questions and needs are. So let me know if there's anything in particular you might want to see
Great.
addressed.
Thank you. With that, I think we're gonna be adjourning it on time at
Good
2.
job.
Yeah,
1 minute
2:30.
early.
exactly, on that time.
So I'll call it adjourned.
Yay, Madam Chair.